Hi, this is Michael Adams for CEORoaster, and yeah, again, I have another CEORoaster going on, and this time it was a really interesting company run by a friend of mine, a long-term friend. I know Ron Rieder for probably 10 years. He used to be a broker with Canaccord, then switched sides and is running his own businesses for a couple of years now, but he can fill us in a little bit later. And yeah, right now we are talking about Galileo Exploration Ltd, trading on the TSX Venture as GXL and also on the German markets. And yeah, it's my pleasure to get some more information about this kind of brand new deal. They are working in Nevada, where the team has a lot of experience, and now I'm really curious to see what Ron can tell us. Okay, Ron, thanks for taking the time to talk to me, and actually good to touch base with you. Yeah, we know each other for 10 years or so, I guess. Had a couple of deals where we worked together on. I was referring to your background as a broker. Yeah, now you switched sides. But please, as a starter, for those guys that don't know you, tell us a little bit about Ron Rieder.
Hey, Michael, thank you very much. And yeah, we have known each other since 2006, actually. That's
Yeah.
what my first notes in the book said. So, and you're looking good. You're looking a little bit younger than I did from back those times.
Thank
So
you.
you're welcome. Yeah. So what can I tell you about myself? I have been in this industry for about 35 years now, and over the last 2 years, though, I decided to take a bit of a break and try out my hobby, which was to cook and to see if
Okay.
I could make food that people would actually buy. And this all comes from my foundation. As my parents, they had a bakery and delicatessen that I was brought up in. So for the
Okay.
first 20 years of my life, I was in a bakery and delicatessen and learned how to serve people. So I ended up opening up this deli called La Bella Mozzarella.
Great name. Okay.
And this was Ronaldo up until just at the beginning of this year. So
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
besides loving to make food, and what I found is that first of all, I'm not Italian, so I was able to tell people I'm not Italian, so I don't play by the rules. And the rules, of course, are Mama's cookbook and how you make Italian authentic food. And but people seem to really enjoy it. And I also had what I called arguably the best coffee in town. So
Okay.
those are my
But
trademarks.
but that's, I think the guy who is claiming to have the best espresso in town is Mario's on, I think I know what's on House Street. Okay,
Yeah,
anyway, so
Mario's
that's
has got about three different locations. But I'll tell you this: here's the best story I can tell about it. I had a sign up front. It said arguably the best coffee in town, and then underneath it said 1,000 served. Okay, and I had this couple come in there from Ontario, and what they said is, "Hey, how can you claim to have arguably the best coffee in town?" And I said, "Well, you're not allowed to argue until you have a coffee, right?" So they sat down and they had a coffee, and I said, "So, is it as good as I claim?" And the guy said to me, he says, "I only have one argument. That sign up front, it should say 1,002." So got that to be a perfect, pat on my back
right.
that the coffee was pretty damn good,
Okay,
so
so you have to, next time I come to Vancouver, you have to A, prepare me a meal, yeah, and B, get me some good coffee. Anyway, so and that was probably the right point in time, yeah, to go after your hobby. The last 2 years, 3 years, yeah, have been pretty bad in the market, so it was
yeah,
probably the right time. And now, on the other hand, is the right time to come back into the market, and that's what you're doing with Galileo Exploration, right?
absolutely, Michael, absolutely. And that's exactly what I saw was this shift in the market from um, being a yeah, from being an opportunity And I like to get ahead of the game in that I like to be in opportunities before the crowd has already rushed into them. So hence Galileo Exploration, and significantly even more so copper. So copper itself is right now we've got a bit of an oversupply in the world markets, but that oversupply is quickly going to change because of the world dynamics in Chile, specifically, where you have the two largest mines in the world. Both of them have labor disruptions all the time, and even more significantly, what we're seeing is a drop-off in the grades of the copper that they're pulling out of the ground. Okay. And then we jump over to the Philippines, where their largest copper producer, BHP, recently fired every one of their employees, over 3,000 people, because, again, of labor disruptions. So now we couple that with Glencore's, out of Zug, Switzerland, their impression of what is going to drive the copper market here over the next, decades, not just years, but decades. And specifically, it's to do with electric cars, all right? They recently put out a report that every electric car that is going to be built, in their battery alone, will have 38 kilograms of copper. That's just in their battery. In the entire car, they estimate about 80 kilograms of copper, okay? So that's 175 pounds of copper in every one of those electric cars.
It's quite interesting. So sorry, Ron. It's quite interesting because a couple of weeks back, I did a CEORoaster interview with Gianni Kovacevic, who's running Copperbank. I'm not sure if you know him.
No, I don't yet, but I should.
Okay, so and he's really also a big advocate for copper. He's calling it kind of the green metal, right? Because for all the new applications, for the, as you said, the electric vehicles, for battery storage, for even for the grid, you need copper, right?
Absolutely, and the green metal, there's it used to be known as the red metal, or is known as the red metal.
It is,
but as anybody would know, as copper oxidizes, it gets a bluish green tint to it.
Right, you're right.
So there you have the green. So just to add on to the vehicle component of it, in the last couple of weeks, Volvo has announced that they will be producing only electric cars within the next, I believe it's 5 years, by 2022 or something like that.
Right.
So that's another. I mean, here you have a huge, global automobile manufacturer going to strictly electric cars.
And you know what? I just read that Porsche, being like a sports car, even Porsche until 2025 or something, they say that 50% of their production will be electric vehicles. Yeah.
So the other thing that Glencore said is that by 2025, that 50%, a third of all vehicles in the world manufactured will be electric vehicles.
Yeah.
Okay. And now we're talking. Of course, China is the largest vehicle purchaser in the world, and what that means is that, and of course they're doing it because of the pollution matter. They're going to be giving all sorts of credits for people to buy electric cars. So, so if you can extrapolate how many cars are sold every year, let's call it 50 million cars globally. And put a number to electric cars on that, being a third of all vehicles, right? So let's call it 15 million a year globally. And you multiply that by the amount of pounds per vehicle, or kilos, which is about 80 kilos per vehicle. You get quite a large new market being introduced into that. And that, and that's not going to. And that's only going to be in addition to the market that's already being expanded, and that is in your infrastructures. China has recently just started to exhibit the signs of expansion again. more into the rural, the third, third class areas. And then, of course, recently, the reason I really jumped on the copper market was because of Donald Trump. Sorry, I'm moving my
No worries.
desk here. It's not an earthquake, but Donald Trump. So the reason I jumped on this is, okay, so here I am. I'm in my, in my hobby, just having some fun, and Donald Trump gets elected. And then at the same time, I was talking with the guys behind Galileo Petroleum at the time, the name to be changed to Galileo Exploration subsequent to that. And we had been looking at several projects in Nevada. I'm going to say we had kicked the stones on getting close to 100 projects over the previous 2 years, right?
Wow.
I had been totally in contact with him. I've been on the board of directors for 3 years now. So, and one of the projects was, and it stuck out like a sore thumb, because all the other projects we've been looking at were gold related, okay? And then we have this Majuba Hill, which was copper, and a significant copper potential based on the work that had been done by several other drillers, several other companies that had drilled on the property and had done geophysical work and had done soil sampling, that sort of thing. So okay. As soon as that happened, it took me about a week to make some of my talk to some of my contacts in the industry about, the dynamics of, what makes a good asset. And specifically the answer was, it doesn't matter if you have gold, silver, lithium. What it matters is your carrying costs and your cost to production and your time frame, right? So when I looked at the all of these check marks, then this Majuba Hill, I couldn't run at it fast enough before somebody else was going to figure it out. And sure enough, as we got back to Buster Hunsaker, who is the vendor of the property, and told him that we were interested, he had 4 other CAs, confidentiality agreements from companies that were looking at his information. So at the time, David Hotman was the CEO of the company, and what I said to him is, we need to send Buster $10,000 US right away to let him know that we are serious about this project, okay? Because it had been only in August of 2016 that we had been putting some numbers together, and we had been putting a contract together with Buster, and then it was like at the 11th hour, we decided not to go with the copper, okay? Because a couple of other gold situations had come, to the forefront, and we were pursuing them. And then when Trump got elected, and I made some phone calls, it became evident that this copper project could become very, very valuable going forward. So, so that's how we jumped on it.
Yeah, let's dig into the presentation. And I think one of the reasons was that probably that Trump is or has to invest into the US infrastructure. And with his approach like Make America Great Again, he's probably looking for sources of copper on the US soil, right? That's probably the thinking behind it. But let's dig into the presentation.
Absolutely. Now get this, and I guess we can get into the presentation. I just want to say one more thing about the vehicles. Okay, and we'll probably get into this again later. The largest manufacturer of electric vehicles in the world is Tesla, right? Tesla is building a 1 million square foot facility in Nevada right now, okay? So here we have one of the sources, potentially, of course, we don't have the copper yet, but we're pretty close to starting our exploration. Here we have a source, and here we have a user right in our backyard. I mean, to me, it just makes so much sense for the opportunity that, you know, for Tesla not to have to look too far for a supply of, you know, the basic material that they're going to need a heck of a lot of going forward. So that's another one of the advantages that we're looking to exploit going forward, is having Tesla right there. So we'll be making a lot of noise, you know, and if Mother Nature has been nice to us here, we'll be on it pretty quickly. So let's get into the presentation, Michael.
Right. So do you want to move the slides, or you know how to work? Yeah. Okay, just go for it.
All right. So probably don't have to beleaguer the fact of why we like copper today for tomorrow, right? Up until the end of 2016, it had been one of the worst performing commodities over the last couple of years. And then what we saw when Trump was elected, that immediately the price spiked from $2, under $2 a pound, to $2.40, and then kept moving to a high of $2.80, $2.85. And then recently it, okay, we probably don't have to go through the dynamics, but recently then it had a little softening, which you anticipate to fill that gap, which brought it back to about the 240, 45 level. And now we've seen it begin to, you know, grab its foundation and move up. It's about 260, 62 at this point in time. Right? Okay. So, and then Michael, as you alluded to, and what I knew as well, all the pre-election rhetoric, was that Donald Trump was, you know, going to be a business person and a president, which meant that their need for infrastructure was, you know, critical. So hence the 500 billion infrastructure plans. I alluded to the Chinese imports recently as well. Goldman Sachs has changed its forecasting. Molly Shutt of BMI has also indicated that she expects that the global deficit will begin in 2019, which is a bit sooner. They had initially projected to be 2020. And then, of course, declining ore grades in Chile. And we have the, what do you call it, production disruptions. Now, one of the interesting factors that I dug up was that the U.S. accounts for only 7.7% of global copper demand. All right, and what that means, because the U.S. is still approximately 40% of the world's economy, right, that using only 7.7% of the copper is a factor that is extremely low when you think about your infrastructure building. Of those that infrastructure is what needs that copper. So I think we're going to see quite an uptick there as well. Somebody pointed out to me, though, that Americans buy a lot of their copper through appliances, through things that they buy from manufacturers overseas, so that they import a lot of their copper through fridges, microwaves, cellular phones, that sort of thing. So okay, that number 7.7 is probably a little bit low, but it's an indication of that direct usage of copper in their infrastructure. You know, let's take out all the stuff that they buy from other countries. That's what they use internally. So why Nevada? Of course, Nevada is considered to be one of the best places in the world for exploration and discovery of base and precious metals. Currently, Nevada is the 4th largest producer in the world of gold, and the past 2 decades alone, over 200 million ounces have been discovered. And 70 million ounces of gold have been produced from the Carlin Trend alone. Now, in Nevada itself, no new copper deposits have been brought into production in decades. And there is a new one called the Pumpkin Hollow Copper Mine, which is expected to begin production this year. And that's the first one, I believe it's the first one in the 2000 millennium that Nevada has brought into production. All right. They've had a lot of international competition with copper, hence, you know, lower cost of production and stuff like that globally. But specifically, there has been an under focus for copper exploration and discoveries, not just in Nevada itself, but globally, right? So, so I think we're going to start to see this dynamic of the electric car, of the infrastructure build, not just in the United States via Trump, but also in China as well. We're starting to see a pickup as well, right? So,
Okay.
so there's why that's really why I jumped on the copper in a big hurry, right? So again, just Nevada. A lot of people already know Nevada as a top global producer of gold and precious metals, and now lithium is also becoming a factor. And I think we should see in the near future that Tesla is doing some sort of a deal for lithium offtake in the state of Nevada. So that should be something that I hear just in the background is brewing. Hence what I mentioned to you earlier about copper, Majuba, Galileo, and Tesla. It's something that's in the back of my mind, but I like to be ahead of the game, so I think about these things far in advance, and we get them planned. So yeah, junior gold companies also benefit from $3 billion that major companies have spent on infrastructure over the last 20 years. So just to give you a little background on Nevada, when you go to write a contract with like purchasing an option for a property like Majuba, we don't have to go in there and rewrite the whole section about your royalties, your ground infrastructures, your costs, because there's what you could consider a Bible in the state of Nevada, and when it's referred to, that means is that this section is now referring to a whole broad section that has already been written, that is now part of the understanding of contract base in Nevada itself. So it just takes a lot of the paperwork and a lot of that time and effort to try to rewrite something that's been already written, and that's part of the infrastructure that we're talking about here.
Right.
So,
okay.
So let's continue on here. So here's our Nevada advantage, and as I mentioned earlier, we had been looking at close to 100 projects in that state alone, and the advantage that we have is that our team has been in and around Nevada for over the last 30 years. All right, and we've announced recently our advisory board, of which we have Gary Nordine and Victor Erickson on the board, and those gentlemen have been involved with some significant discoveries in the past.
Okay. Most
recently, in 2007, Nevada Pacific, which was acquired by McEwen Mining, also known as Gold Corp USA, was just the indicator of their success in Nevada in most recent times, the last decade. So, just to give you just some background, recently Vic Erickson sold his Cadillac Ventures, which had a property just to the east of the border of Nevada in the state of Utah, and they sold it to Pilot Gold, and Pilot Gold currently has that property that he bought from Victor Erickson as their #1 property in their project in their company. So that's Vic Erickson's claim to fame. On the other side, we have Gary Nordine, and Gary's been involved. He was a co-founder of Bema Gold. He was a co-founder of El Dorado Gold, and he was also a co-founder of Nevada Pacific Gold. And what Gary has been able to do over his professional life is he has 4 discoveries of 1 to 2 million ounces that have gone into production, and he has 2 discoveries of 6 to 8 million ounces. So here's a geologist who has had 6 discoveries in his life. Now, a geologist, if he has 1 discovery, he's considered lucky. 2 discoveries, he's considered good and lucky. 3 discoveries is wow, this guy knows his stuff. And any more than that, then you've got somebody that, and I term it to be on God-like status, and that is GAWD, God-like status. Okay. So here's the gentleman that we have in our background who are helping us in making these decisions on where to look going forward. And and I'll go through it in a little bit here about how Gary has overlaid information from 4 companies that have done the work in the past, and he's been able to assimilate all of that, put it into one program, and then say, we should be looking here. Okay. That's exactly what, so Buster Hunsaker, who's the vendor of the property, in talking to him about a month ago, and I asked him, you know, like Buster, you've had this project for a number of years. You know, what do you think? What do you think our chances are here? And so he says to me, he goes, you know what? Until Gary stood beside me on the property, and he grabbed me by the shoulders, and he turned me around, and he said, all of that is good, but why has nobody drilled here? Okay. And Buster just, you know, since that time, Buster's even had a epiphany of going, wow, you know, no wonder everybody's been focused on the Majuba Hill and not reading the information that has been already accumulated by other companies and then overlaid it. They were looking for the obvious, and Gary Nordine pointed out that, well, this is the obvious, it's just people haven't taken their time to put it all together here, right? Okay. So getting back to, let's go through this a little bit more. Galileo, we're focused on maximizing shareholder value through precious and base metal exploration in the state of Nevada. Company's board of directors and management and our advisory board have a successful history of acquiring, exploring, discovery, and development of quality projects. So our corporate philosophy is to build a portfolio of quality project opportunities, of which the Majuba project is only the first. We do intend to add additional high potential gold, silver, gold exploration projects through our extensive networks of contacts in Nevada itself. So that is also our intention, and that's at the end of July. I'm heading down to the Majuba, okay, and at the same time I'll be going with Gary to a number of other gold properties that we have been kicking the tires on, and you know, what I like about Gary is it doesn't matter how much information he has in front of him. He needs to go and stand on the ground and really get a feel for it, get that smell in his nostrils, so he can tell if there's something there, right? So, and that's why, as I mentioned earlier, that we've looked at over 100 projects, and you know, and the Majuba stuck out like a sore thumb, and you know, on the gold side, a number of opportunities, but nothing so pronounced as the Majuba.
Okay, but for future acquisitions, you are sticking to Nevada, or are you also looking for other jurisdictions?
We're sticking to where we're strong, and that's Nevada. If we might get into the neighboring states, right? As it looks like that continental fold in you know, from the Pacific Shelf moving into the continental shelf. Looks like it may have put some corridors a little bit further east. So getting into specifically, an example is that, you know, Cadillac Ventures, aka Victor Erickson, being sold to Pilot Gold and having it develop into a much bigger scenario, right? So, but definitely in the western United States, right? Okay. We may look at Arizona a little bit, but you know, we're going to stay where we're strong.
Okay.
Right, so,
oh, good.
There's a board of directors I've had over 30 years. Mark Brown has been involved with several successful public companies. Mark Blythe, international mining expert, evaluation, development of numerous mineral projects, gold, silver, copper. Here's a guy on our board of directors who has been a senior mining engineer with Placer Dome, WMC Resources, So another example of how strong our board of directors are and our advisory board. So I like to say that I'm the dumb guy in the room, right? I'm just the mouthpiece, the salesman, and because I've got the real smart guys behind me telling me where to go, what to look. So, all right. So where's the Majuba Hill project? We are 12 miles northwest of Rye Patch Gold's Florida Canyon mine. All right. We're also about 30 miles from Coeur Mining's Rochester mine. So what we have in our direct vicinity are two producing gold and silver mines. All right. So we're not in an area that is uncommon for there to be discoveries of gold and silver. All right. So that's our closeology to other projects. So a little background, it's 4 square miles. It covers an advanced stage copper, silver, gold porphyry system. And Gary feels that the complex is approximately 1,500 meters in diameter and the central core measuring about 500 by 700 meters. This is a large footprint that we're looking at here. All right. So, and what Gary has seen is that the drilling is indicated, past drilling is indicating that there's a strengthening to the south of this, of the copper anomaly that is out there. All right. So, as of May 31st, the company had conditional exchange approval. Now we are at July the 13th today, and as of a week ago, we had submitted all of the paperwork requested by the exchange in order to receive their final approvals. All right. Okay. And that includes the 43-101 report. So that report is already completed.
What's your best guess? How long will it take you to get the approval from the exchange?
Well, okay, so they've had it for about 10 days now. And from what I understand, it takes them anywhere from 2 to 3 weeks to start to, to get on it. Now, I used Alan Morris out of Nevada, and Alan had already submitted a couple of lithium reports as 43-101s for other companies. So I like to using people that the exchange is already familiar with, and that's what we had here was Alan Morris, who was just happened to be available and was in the state of Nevada. That's where he's based. So he was, he was right there for us, and that's why we were able to get. He was able to get it done. Basically, we contacted him in around June. Well, about June the 15th. Sorry, May the 15th. Right, knowing that this may have to go, have it done. So he had it all done for us in about 7 weeks. So that's a pretty good turnaround on a report. And I also have to say that Buster Hunsaker, in anticipation that a report might be needed, had already started to accumulate a lot of the information that was necessary for it. So that was a head start on about, we'll say on about 25% of it. And then Alan really went to work and did his homework. And now we have a pretty comprehensive report, and which will be available to the public as soon as we get everything vetted by the exchange. So again, we are July 13th. They've had it for 10 days. So I'm going to predict by the end of this month that we have it in some form. Yeah. So let's continue on. So this is the Majuba Hill. All right. And this is an ancient volcanic cone, which the area, and in Alan's report, he outlines the volcanics in the area. What this shows, this picture alone, is that Majuba had past production of about 2.8 million pounds of copper and an average grade of 4 to 12%. Okay. So, and this is where the arrow points here. This is where the production was coming from. They had 2 adits, or 2 holes that past producers had dug into the Majuba, and they have an upper and they have a mid station And out of those two adits, they have produced about 2.8 million pounds of copper. All right, and along with that, there was 5,500 ounces of gold, and there was 180,000 ounces of silver. Okay, along with that copper production. So it just goes to show you that there's a good component of silver and gold that has already been recognized through past production. Okay, so here are the aspects that Gary Nordin was able to use from past exploration companies to overlay and to make his determination of where potentially this deposit would be. So what we have here is we have copper in soils, right? And we have, this is a footprint of the property out. There's a property outline, obviously. So we see that on the bottom, to the very, almost to the center, where he's got what looks like a sleeve. When you look at the lower right corner, you see an elliptical shape, and then you've got a bunch of red dots that are within that shape.
Like here,
Yes.
This one?
Exactly, exactly. So, and that's where he's saying that, so all of the area here that's barren, that you see no soils, well, if we go back, I can show you the picture later on, but you can see that through time and through wind factors, all of the surface has been blown away, so there's no soils, all right? Hence, when you go, you got to go around the periphery. So when we come to the periphery, we come to this spot here, and as soon as there are soils, we see that there's a highly elevated amount of copper in soil right at where this elliptical shape is. When another company did an IP chargeability study, which is induced polarization chargeability, basically what they do is they put an electrode on one side, an electrode on the other side, and they feed a current between them, and they see what kind of chargeability. They see if there's any, see if there's anything that's able to hold a charge between those two electrodes. Okay. So that's where you have that big elliptical, because so we have the soils in the red, and then we have the elliptical, and then so here we have what was done in the past on the IP survey side, okay, and that is a company ran 3 lines, and they did it with a 600-meter spacing. And what that means is that between, from one line to the next line to the next line, there was a 600-meter spacing or differential.
Yeah, let's just kind of point this out. So these are the lines, yes. 1, 2, 3, and yes. This is like, this distance is 600 meters, right?
Yes. Now it looks like the distance there that you pointed out is further than this other distance, but you have to factor in the height of the Majuba, okay, right? And there's much more of a slope on the south side than there is on the north side. Okay, so that's why the distances look shorter as to the left as they do to the right.
Okay.
So now, when we come and we see this, and I have this circled where this large IP chargeability anomaly was, now we're talking 600-meter spacings, and then right on top of this one spacing, of this one IP chargeability line, is this whopping anomaly, and that anomaly is something like 400 to 500 meters long, and that's where Gary gets his outline of 700 meters by 500 meters. Exactly.
Right.
So
okay.
I'm just going to go back one slide very quickly.
Sure.
And you see how that elliptical is here,
yep.
Okay, and how it's overlaid exactly where the soils came out with elevated soils, elevated copper in soils. All right.
Okay.
So now we come to the next component that he puts together, and this is an indication of the drilling. Okay. And if we look at the picture, and this looks like what could you say? It looks like a the concentration of drilling. If we look at the left upper side of, what would that be, like a sleeve without a hand in it, we'll call it, right? Up in there, yes. Now, where I mentioned that there was the past production, that is where people did most of their drilling because of the high grade that was taken out of there. So the other companies, and that's what I meant by they were focusing on where everybody else was, because that's where the low-hanging fruit they felt was being able to, just go and drill in here, and then we're going to find a massive stockwork of copper, right? But as I noted earlier, that the Majuba, which is now a hill, used to be a cone, and if we look at gravitational flow, and we look at just the fact that that cone had collapsed all on the south side, right? So if we can imagine a pond that is elevated but is holding molten lava and magma, and then over time you get a disruption of that south wall, and then you get a collapse, so that all of the fluids that are in there go to the south where the collapse is. All right. So now this is where Gary's intelligence and his experience, instead of looking at where everybody else has looked, we look at the factors of the drilling and what it's actually telling us. Now, on the right-hand corner, you see MMX 24. Okay. Yes, exactly. Now, of the 61 holes that were drilled on the Majuba, only two of them went in a direction that was somewhat southerly. Every other one of them was in the south to north, southwest to northeast, southeast to northwest, always in that direction, but almost always to the north. All right. So MMX 24 went in a northwest to a southeast direction. All right, and just clipped what Gary thought was the significant zone, but to him, it told him that to the south, we're starting to get an increase in the grades, okay, which is another indication for him. All right, so on MMX 24, we see, and this was the very, very last hole that was ever drilled on this project, and that was done in 2015. So it's quite current. All right.
Okay. So
we have a section from 219 meters to 336 meters, which is, it's about 117 meters. It's just shy of 400 feet, 0.43%. And then the 12 indicates how many grams of silver there were included with that 0.43% copper. So we also had 12 grams of silver.
Okay.
Now, a hole MF1, which is just below MMX, yes, exactly. This was the only other hole that went in a slightly southerly direction. This hole was actually collared on the west side to go directly across the Majuba, underneath and into where everybody else had been drilling. Okay, but they went at an angle that was somewhat southeast. So now when we look at that, we see that at exactly 219 meters to 358 meters, so a section of about 130 meters or 400 feet at the same depth as MMX 24, that they had a large intersection there of 0.244% and 13 grams of silver. Okay, so here we have correlating holes done several years apart that have just basically scratched the outer edges of where Gary thinks that this deposit could be. And here we have, both holes intersecting it at about the same depth. So when Gary overlays the soils, and then he overlays that with the IP anomaly done on a 600-meter spacing, and then he takes the drilling and takes all that other background noise away, as far as where everybody else has drilled, but looks at what the information is telling him, that's where he's able to come up with, taking Buster by the shoulders, turning him around and saying, why has nobody drilled here? All right,
Okay.
so this is just another indication of the past drill holes here as well. All right, so we see that we've indicated the past drill holes, MMX24 and MF1, just bordering our target zone. All right, so but you can see that. Okay, this is a three-dimensional map, so the target is further to the left or to the south than where the drill holes that these guys had put into the ground. All right, okay. It put into the ground and hit the zone at the same depth and the same, almost the same length of the zone, being about 400 feet of significantly, significant. What do you call it? Grades of copper and silver. So now, here's what we're looking at here as far as the Majuba itself. And earlier I mentioned about how about the soils had been kind of swept off, and then you don't start to get to the soils until you see what it looked like patchy sagebrush and stuff like that. That's where you start to get a few of the soils, and that's where you have the edge of where the soils begin. Right away you've got an anomaly, and that anomaly happens to be right on top of the IP anomaly, which is correlating itself. And then when you look at the past drilling, which has basically gone from the right peak on the picture here, okay, towards the left peak, but just skimming the top of where Gary thinks that deposit is, and then with MF01, where they would be a little bit further down that right peak, and they would have drilled and skimmed it like along the top of it, right? So they would have been going up towards the past production. Only, of course, it would have been down towards it because they're drilling down into the earth, right? Okay. So here is the outline of the anomaly being 500 meters in width because of that IP anomaly that shows us that is 400 to 500 meters, right? And then where the drilling begins, past drilling has made some contact with that zone and to where the elevated copper soils are. So basically, he's condensed what the size that he thinks it is to use within the boundaries of the information that we've already received from other companies. All right, okay. So in his mind, it's a conservative estimate as to the potential size of this thing. All right, so so that is where we have our, we're very optimistic about the potential here. Now, we've also, yesterday I talked to our contractor down in Nevada, and I'm going to be down on the property from the 26th to the 29th, and I was told that our exploration, which will consist of doing the IP chargeability study, where we're going to do 3 1-kilometer lines that are 100 meters apart, okay, right over top of that past anomaly, and we'll do it on a gradient that's about 45 degrees differential than the other lines that I showed you, right? Okay. Just so we do kind of a cross section instead of following the same pattern. We'll do a cross section across it, and what we anticipate to see from that is just a like a Christmas tree lighting up, because if you've got charge here and charge here, and you put a electric current through it, then that should give us the basis for our drilling platforms going forward. Okay, so that's what we're doing here, is we put down the 3 IP lines 100 meters apart, and then that tightens up the grid to which we can drill from. All right, okay. So the real opportunity here for an investor is the fact that we've got all of the reports in that the exchange requires. We anticipate to get the green light from them within the next, we'll say within the next 2 weeks to a month. All right. I'm not going to wait for them to tell me that I can begin exploration, because they've already given me conditional approval, which is why we've got the IP contractor already lined up to start on July the 24th. So he's going to be on our property. So we're going to have a pretty good indication almost immediately about the chargeability of that ground. And then that will give us the basis for picking our drill sites. And we've also, this week, we're putting in our drilling permit applications, because they take somewhere between they take about 6 to 8 weeks. Sometimes it can be quicker, but let's call it 6 weeks. So we anticipate that we'll get this chargeability study done. That will tell us exactly where we put our drill rigs. We've got the drilling permits already being put into application, which we anticipate will call 6 to 8 weeks. So that brings us to end of August, middle of September. And so that is what our target is. So sometime in September is what our target is, to be drilling this Majuba project. And all we have to do is drill 2 holes of about 300 meters each and get the assays. And that will tell us if we're sitting on an elephant in the form of a copper, silver, gold porphyry in this project. So all-in costs on that, somewhere in the neighborhood of about $300,000 US. So I think if an exploration team could tell you that for under $300,000 US, that they could make a major discovery, you know, I think that most people would take a chance and make an investment in that kind of an opportunity. Right. So, yeah. Okay. So this is where my excitement lies, right? And it's been really a challenge to be as patient as I've had to be, because you know, it's like having a candy underneath your hand, and somebody telling you you're not allowed to eat that candy until, you know. Right. But I guess it's like mother telling you you got to eat your spinach before you can have your candy.
No, it's to me really it's a really interesting story, and actually I was just about to tell the audience, especially because the valuation with only 18 or 19 million shares out, trading around the 10-cent level, right?
That's correct.
So so what's the downside, right? So
it's one of those opportunities that you only come across once every, you know, several years, right? And in my experience, an opportunity like this, I've had several successes in investing in different companies. I've had to do my homework on several different companies for my clients, and it takes somewhere between 2 and 3 years. Every 2 to 3 years, I had this sort of an investment opportunity for my clients. And now I'm sitting on top of this kind of an opportunity for my shareholders, right? So I think there's a real good shot. And of course, with all the information that I've just given you, you know, I think that Galileo presents a really good opportunity here going forward.
Yeah. No, again, I totally agree. And maybe one last question from my end. Yeah, as you said, the team has in the past already sold a couple of projects to mid-tier producers, and so, but you were talking about getting into production, and being a possible supplier for Tesla. So like in 5 years, did you sell the company, or are you in production?
Sold the company. Yeah.
Okay, that's good.
Sold the company. Yeah.
Okay, that's cool.
Even though we've got these experienced people, you'll notice that they've always sold the properties to other producers. Yeah. So we're a discovery and an exploration and discovery team for sure.
Okay. Ron,
Now,
thank you
just
very much.
Michael, just quickly, sorry.
Don't go
Just to
away.
give you an idea, we've set up a Nevada corporation to hold these assets, right? So that if we do have another project come in, right, and the Majuba is of a size that it can be sold, so that we don't have to sell everything to one company. We can sell just the copper assets or
Right.
just the gold assets, right? So that's how we do a little bit of corporate structuring by having those entities in separate vehicles within our, within our umbrella of projects.
Yeah,
right?
no, totally makes sense. So I just give you my 2 cents, right? So we have a very good
10 cents,
management
I
team.
hope, right?
Excuse me?
10 cents, I hope, right?
That's the stock price right now. No. So I think we have a pretty experienced, as Ron laid out, we have a pretty experienced management team, especially in Nevada. They have proven their success in the past, which is always very important to me. Yeah, and we have a very low valuation, which right now with the outstanding shares is below 2 million Canadian dollars, and we have a huge chance. Yeah, I'm not a geo, but even I understood that, and I just put it in my words. Yeah, so this project has been in production in the pre-Second World War phase, right? Copper price went down, and but still there was some exploration, some in the recent years, right? But they kind of didn't drill the right way, right? So now with this experienced team, Ron and Gary, yeah, he came up with an idea where it's better to drill. Right now, the company is waiting for the final approval of the exchange, which will enable them to get the ball really rolling. They are starting towards the end of this month with their IP, and then immediately followed up by drilling, which is fairly inexpensive. Yeah, as Ron said, it's only 300 grand, yeah, for 2 holes to prove up the potential of the project. And you get all of this for below 2 million Canadian dollars right now. So to me, it's at least worth that you take a look at the company, do your own due diligence, bother Ron. Yeah, his phone number. No, it's not his phone number, but his email is there. It's info@GalileoExploration Ltd.com. There's also a bunch of information, including this presentation, is on the website. So check that out. And yeah, Ron, I guess the final words are yours.
Michael, I want to thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to let your followers know about this story. One of the reasons that it is so lightly valued at this time is I've been mired in this in the paperwork for the exchange in getting the regulatory stuff done, and I have done very little in the way of marketing for the company, and that's going to start up as well quite quickly here, right? Is start to let the world know more about Galileo Exploration and about the opportunity that is about to become quite apparent to us here. So yeah, so those would be my final words. And Michael, next time you're in town, I live down on the Beach Avenue, so I've got a beautiful view of English Bay, and I make you a great gourmet La Bella Mozzarella Chef de Maison Ronaldo is who I was, and I make you a nice meal, and I'll make sure to get you a good cup of coffee, because when I sold the place, I made sure to extract a few bags of the coffee as I was leaving the door. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Ron.
All right, Michael. Thank you as well. Cheers.